Coming up next on C-SPAN 2, a hearing on global climate change. The House Science, Space, and Technology Committee held this hearing on Wednesday. The committee met to look at recent studies on greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. Members discussed possible options for reducing greenhouse gas emissions in America, especially in the production and use of energy.
Committee will come to order. The subject of our hearing this morning is technologies and strategies for addressing global warming, and this represents one of the most monumental and complex challenges of our times. The threat of global warming has captured the attention of world government leaders, of industry, environmental organizations, and citizens around the globe. The search for policy responses to the threat of global warming is a daunting but necessary exercise. Concentrations in the atmosphere of greenhouse gases have increased markedly as a result of human activity. Many governments have begun to formulate national policies for reducing emissions of the most predominant greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide, which is emitted whenever fossil fuels are burned. While many industrialized nations have adopted specific targets and timetables for curbing carbon dioxide emissions, the United States has resisted such an approach, which has resulted in a degree of isolation between our government and other major industrialized nations on this issue. For example, Britain's strong position on global warming was reiterated last week in a speech by British Prime Minister John Major. The United Kingdom plans to stabilize carbon dioxide emissions to 1990 levels by the year 2005. It has also been reported that British Environmental Secretary Michael Hazeltine is disappointed with the results of meetings he has had with the United States on the global warming issue. Our witnesses today will describe what is rapidly becoming an indisputable fact, that global warming is a fundamental reality, and we must act now to formulate the appropriate national and international responses. We will also hear that there exists a wide range of available and affordable policy and technology options which can reduce the rate of global warming. Many of these technologies are attractive for reasons far beyond their role in reducing greenhouse gases, such as their potential to reduce air pollution and enhance our energy security. Moreover, the rapid deployment of these technologies and strategies will slow the warming trend and thus buy us time to reconfigure our global economy to reduce its dependence on carbon-intensive energy sources and to increase its energy efficiency. We will also explore today the business and trade opportunities associated with commercializing technologies for reducing greenhouse gases. The United States has all too often footed the bill for large basic and applied research and development programs only to watch while other nations reap the benefits of that research by being the first with a commercial application. Are we missing out on lucrative international business opportunities by failing to develop and commercialize technologies that combat global warming or increase energy efficiency? Those who choose to ignore or deny the possibility of a significantly altered global climate system place their fate entirely in the hands of chance. Those who squarely face the threat have an opportunity to bet conservatively by investing now in technologies and strategies for slowing the warming trend. The choice is ours, and I believe we will find that the options are many if we opt to explore them. We are all at the gambling table, and the stakes are high. How will we fashion our bet? I am optimistic that our witnesses here today will be able to help us answer that important question. The knowledge gained today will help us to shape the committee's future agenda with respect to this most important problem.
Hardly represents an international recognition of the validity of our policies. I suspect that Sunday's Washington Post article describing a rather strongly worded and publicly leaked letter from Britain excoriating us for our lack of leadership in carbon dioxide emission control is a more accurate representation of this recognition. Additional research needs, Prime Minister Major said, cannot excuse inaction. The threat is too serious.
Now let me recognize the distinguished chairman of our committee on subcommittee on the environment, who has a major long-standing concern in this area. Mr. Scheuer.
I thank the chairman. I have joined him in a long-standing concern for the environment. I hope he is not joining me in my true state of depression as to the pace of global action on global warming, and my feeling that the United States is a rogue elephant rampaging through the underbrush of the world effort to contain global warming, to contain greenhouse gases, to contain dissemination of more and more and more fossil fuels into the atmosphere. The United States seems to be bent on defying the conscience of the world. We should be embarrassed by the message of Prime Minister Major in England that my colleague from Michigan just described. We should be embarrassed by that letter from British Environment Secretary Michael Heseltine, a tough letter in which he, in effect, said that Britain would find, and I quote, Britain would find it hard to be a bridge between European and American proposals if the United States stuck to its rejection of targets for carbon dioxide emissions. Mr. Chairman, the United States is flying in the face of the enlightened sentiment of the developed world. Virtually every country in the developed world is trying urgently and desperately to reduce their carbon dioxide emissions into the atmosphere, except with the notorious exception of the United States of America. This calls into stage center the crying need for some kind of a global environmental ethic that has teeth in it, some kind of a global common law that will restrict and contain a country like the United States that chooses to be a rogue elephant and bring down the temple on all of us, because all of us are at risk when any country ignores the conscience of the world, ignores the consensus of the scientists of the world, that global warming is real, that greenhouse gases are real. There may be some dispute at the margin as to how strong, how fast, how devastating, in what period of time, but that the facts are there, and that the principle of global warming is a devastating one cannot be disputed. It seems to me that the nations of the world have got to establish some kind of real control over its errant members. Notions of sovereignty, such as have prevailed for hundreds of years, have to subsume some kind of retreat in the face of this urgent need for a consensus of the enlightened leadership of the developed world, as well as the developing world, to prevail. We need to create a set of legally established rights in the international community, rights of virtually all of the nations of the world, not to be imposed upon by any one, as the United States is now imposing on the world. We need to establish wrongs that a nation cannot abuse the commonly accepted concept of where the nations of the world have to go in terms of protecting this fragile planet in which we live. And once having declared rights and having declared wrongs, we must declare remedies, as has been the case for hundreds of years in the English common law. And the remedy must be means whereby the international community can express his will with teeth. Now, that doesn't mean dropping a smart bomb on New York, Washington, or San Francisco. That does mean giving the international community effective ways for making itself heard and making itself felt in ways that would penetrate the apparently impenetrable brain of Mr. Sununu in Washington, who, as my colleague from Michigan has identified, has been such a destroyer and destructor and ravager of the international consensus to take positive common action to protect this fragile planet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.